My name is Arlene and I'm 32 years old. I've always been an animal lover, especially cats. Whiskers was more than just a rescue cat to me. He saved me from depression as much as I saved him from that storm drain. I never imagined my own parents would betray me during a family emergency by selling him behind my back. What followed was 6 years of no contact, them spreading lies to pressure me into reconciliation until I finally exposed everything online. Before I share my story, let me know where you're watching from. In the comments, hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up for yourself against family manipulation. Growing up with James and Diana Anderson as parents wasn't easy. Our two-story colonial house in suburban Connecticut might have looked perfect from the outside with its manicured lawn and seasonal decorations. But inside perfection wasn't just expected, it was demanded. My father, a corporate attorney with salt and pepper hair, and a perpetual frown, ruled our home with strict schedules and even stricter expectations. My mother, a real estate agent with an immaculate appearance and social calendar to match, was obsessed with what the neighbors might think. Arlene, stand up straight. The Johnsons are coming over for dinner, my mother would say, tugging at my clothes and hair when I was just 8 years old. Remember, we always show our best face to the world. My childhood bedroom was spotless, not by choice, but by mandate. Toys had designated places, books were arranged by height, and anything deemed excessive mysteriously disappeared during my mother's weekly cleaning inspections. The one thing I begged for consistently was a pet. Animals are messy and unpredictable, my father would explain in his lawyer voice. They don't belong in a proper home. And so, instead of real animals, I collected stuffed ones, creating a secret sanctuary under my bed, where I'd whisper to my plush friends about the real animals I'd rescue someday. School became my escape. I excelled in science, particularly biology, fascinated by the complexity of living creatures. By high school, I was volunteering at the local animal shelter every weekend, coming home with fur on my clothes that would send my mother into cleaning frenzies. "You smell like that shelter again," she'd say, wrinkling her nose. "Go change immediately and put those clothes in the laundry room, in the plastic bin, not touching anything else." When college application time came, my parents had my future mapped out. "Business administration at your father's alma mater," my mother announced over dinner one night. "It's practical, respectable, and will set you up for success." Their definition of success, not mine. The argument that followed when I told them I wanted to study veterinary medicine was epic. My father's face turned that dangerous shade of red I'd learned to fear. "Veterinary medicine. Spending your life cleaning up after sick animals. That's what you want to do with the education we're paying for." His voice had that deadly quiet tone that was worse than yelling. My mother's approach was different, but equally effective. "Think of your future darling, who will want to marry a woman who comes home smelling like animal dander every day. Be reasonable." I wasn't reasonable, at least not by their standards. I applied to veterinary programs anyway. And when I was accepted to my first choice school across the state, I went despite their disapproval. They paid for my education, something they never let me forget. But it came with strings attached. Phone calls filled with passive-aggressive comments about my phase and how I'd come to my senses eventually. College was challenging, but fulfilling. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who understood my passion for animal welfare. I thrived academically and emotionally, even dating a fellow student named Mark, who shared my dream of opening a wildlife rehabilitation center someday. But that relationship ended in our final year when he took a job opportunity overseas, and I wasn't ready to leave everything behind. After graduation, the reality of student loans and a competitive job market hit hard. Entry-level positions at veterinary practices paid less than I'd hoped, and most wildlife centers wanted experienced vets. I took a job at a small practice that barely covered my bills, lived in a tiny apartment with 3 roommates, and tried to save whatever I could. Then came the economic downturn. The practice downsized, my hours were cut, and my financial safety net unraveled quickly. After 3 months of scrambling to make rent, I faced the one option I'd been avoiding, moving back in with my parents temporarily. "Of course you can come home," my mother said when I called, her voice carrying that subtle note of satisfaction I knew too well. "We always said the business degree would have been more stable." Moving back at 26 felt like failure. My parents had converted my bedroom into a home office within months of my leaving for college, so I was relegated to the finished basement. Still, it had a separate entrance, a small bathroom, and enough space for my minimal belongings. The arrangement was supposed to be temporary, just until I found a better paying position and saved enough for a security deposit on a new place. 3 months after moving back during a particularly violent thunderstorm, I found Whiskers. I was driving home from a job interview when I saw something dart across the road and fall into a storm drain. Pulling over, I peered down to see a soaking wet, terrified orange tabby cat clinging to the edge of the drain, trying desperately not to fall into the rushing water below. Without hesitation, I called emergency services, but they were overwhelmed with storm-related incidents. "We'll try to get someone out there, but it might be a while," the dispatcher said apologetically. That wasn't good enough. I ran to a nearby construction site, found a worker, and begged to borrow a ladder. Together, we managed to lower it into the drain. I climbed down, my heart pounding as the water rose around my ankles. The cat hissed in fear as I approached. "It's okay," I whispered, extending my hand slowly. "I'm here to help you." After several tense minutes, I managed to wrap the trembling cat in my jacket and climb back up to safety, thanking the construction worker profusely, before rushing the cat to the veterinary clinic where I had interviewed earlier. The cat, a male about 3 years old according to the vet, had no microchip collar or any signs of being someone's pet. He was severely underweight, had a respiratory infection, and his left front paw was injured, though thankfully not broken. "He's been on his own for a while," the vet explained. "Are you planning to keep him?" I hadn't thought that far ahead, but looking at the frightened orange tabby receiving treatment on the exam table, I knew my answer. Yes, if no one claims him. No one did. I named him Whiskers because of his exceptionally long facial whiskers that had somehow survived his ordeal intact. Bringing him home was another battle with my parents. "Absolutely not," my father declared when I explained the situation. "We had an agreement when you moved back. No pets." "He has nowhere else to go," I argued. "The shelters are full and he needs medication and care while he recovers." "Then find someone else to take him," my mother suggested, as if homeless cats were easily placed. "The Simpson girl down the street likes animals, doesn't she?" It took 3 days of negotiations, promises about keeping him confined to the basement, and assurances that he'd be gone once I moved out before they reluctantly agreed. Their conditions were strict. Whiskers couldn't come upstairs, couldn't make noise, and all his supplies had to be kept out of sight when they came downstairs, which fortunately wasn't often. Nursing Whiskers back to health became my purpose. He was skittish at first, hiding under furniture and hissing when approached, but slowly, with patience and gentle care, he began to trust me. The first time he voluntarily climbed into my lap while I was reading, purring loudly as I petted him, I cried from joy. As months passed, Whiskers transformed from a frightened, sickly stray into a confident, affectionate companion. His orange fur grew glossy, his green eyes bright and curious. He had quirky habits that endeared him to me, even more, like bringing me his favorite toy mouse whenever I seemed sad, or sitting beside my laptop while I job searched, occasionally batting at the cursor as if helping. During that period, I struggled with recurring depression. The combination of career setbacks, financial stress, and living under my parents' critical gaze again took its toll. There were days when getting out of bed felt impossible, but Whisker seemed to sense those moments. He'd nudge my face with his cold nose purr against my chest and stay beside me until I found the strength to face the day. My parents, true to form, found ways to express their disapproval of Whiskers, despite rarely seeing him. "The basement is starting to smell," my mother would comment during our infrequent family dinners. "And I found orange hairs on the laundry room floor. You need to be more careful." My father was more direct. "That animal is costing you money you should be saving. Every dollar you spend on cat food is another day you're living under our roof." I bit my tongue, saved aggressively from my new job at a local veterinary practice, and counted down the days until I could afford my own place. After 3 years, I was close, with just 2 more months of saving needed for the security deposit on an apartment I'd found that accepted pets. Whiskers was now a healthy, robust cat of about 6 years old. He'd overcome his early health issues and had become my closest companion. He slept curled against me every night, greeted me at the door when I returned from work, and had an uncanny ability to sense my emotions. When I told him quietly about my plans for our new home, he'd purr and knead my leg as if understanding every word. Just a little longer, I promised him one evening, scratching behind his ears the way he loved. Soon we'll have our own place where you can roam freely. I had no idea that our time together was about to be cut short in the most heartbreaking way possible. The call came on a Tuesday evening in September. I was just home from work feeding Whiskers his dinner when my phone rang. It was my Aunt Meredith, my mother's sister, her voice uncharacteristically shaky. "Arlene, it's your grandmother. She's had a heart attack. They've taken her to Memorial Hospital in Albany." My grandmother Ruth, my mother's mother, was 82 and had been in relatively good health. The news hit me like a physical blow. Despite my complicated relationship with my parents, I adored my grandmother, who had always been a gentle presence in my life, sneaking me cookies and whispering encouragement when my parents weren't listening. "Is she okay?" I asked, my heart racing. "It's serious," Aunt Meredith replied. "Your mother and father are preparing to drive up tonight. You should come too." After hanging up, I rushed upstairs to find my parents packing overnight bags. "We're leaving in 30 minutes, my father announced without preamble. "Pack what you need for at least a week." A week. I looked at my mother, whose face was pale with worry. "Mom, what about Whiskers? I can't leave him alone for a week." She waved a dismissive hand. "That cat, it can survive a few days. Just leave extra food." "No, he needs daily care. I could ask my friend Jasmine to check on him, but she works long shifts and couldn't come every day." I hesitated before continuing, knowing what I was about to ask. "Could you both possibly look after him until I find another solution? Just fill his food and water, clean his litter box." My parents exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. "Fine," my father finally said. "But you're asking a lot, Arlene. Your grandmother is in critical condition and you're worried about a cat." I bit back a retort about how caring for one didn't preclude concern for the other. Instead, I hurried to pack and prepare detailed instructions for Whisker's care, which I placed on the kitchen counter, feeding times medication for his occasional respiratory flare-ups, his preference for fresh water twice daily, and how to clean his litter box properly. Before leaving, I spent a few precious minutes with Whiskers, who seemed to sense something was wrong, pressing himself against my legs more insistently than usual. "I'll be back as soon as I can," I promised, stroking his soft fur. "Be good for them, okay?" The 5-hour drive to Albany was tense. My father drove in grim silence while my mother made calls to other family members. I sat in the back texting Jasmine about possibly checking on Whiskers later in the week if my parents seemed overwhelmed. At the hospital, we found my grandmother in intensive care, hooked up to monitors and looking frighteningly frail. The doctor explained she'd had a major heart attack and would need surgery once she was stable enough. The next few days would be critical. We took shifts sitting with her. When not at the hospital, we stayed at my aunt's house nearby, sleeping in her guest rooms and eating whatever food relatives brought over. Each night I called home to check on Whiskers. "The cat's fine," my father would answer tersely. "Focus on your grandmother. Is he eating? Did you give him fresh water? Did you clean his litter box?" I'd press. "Yes, yes, everything's fine. Stop calling about the cat." By the 4th day, my grandmother's condition had stabilized enough for surgery, which went better than expected. The doctor was cautiously optimistic about her recovery, though she would remain in the hospital for at least another week. "You should go back to work," my mother suggested on day 6. "There's nothing more you can do here, and you've already taken so much time off. Your father and I will stay until she's discharged." It made sense. My grandmother was improving, my paid leave was running out, and I missed Whiskers terribly. We agreed I'd drive back the next morning. That night I called home one last time. My father answered, sounding distracted. "Dad, I'm coming home tomorrow. How's Whiskers doing?" There was a pause, longer than normal. "He's fine, Arlene. Drive safely tomorrow." Something in his tone bothered me, but I dismissed it as stress from the situation. The next morning, I hugged my parents goodbye, visited my grandmother one last time, promising to call daily for updates, and began the long drive home. I arrived back at the house around 4 p.m., exhausted, but relieved to be home. All I wanted was to scoop up Whiskers, feel his comforting purr, and collapse into bed. I entered through the basement door calling his name. Whiskers, I'm home, buddy. No orange blur came running. No meow greeted me. The basement was eerily quiet. Whiskers. I checked under the bed in the bathroom in all his favorite hiding spots. Nothing. Panic rising, I rushed upstairs, thinking maybe my parents had let him roam while I was away. The house was empty and spotless, no sign of cat hair or toys. Back in the basement, I noticed his food bowl, water dish, and litter box were gone too. My phone rang. It was my mother. "Did you get home safely?" she asked. "Where's Whiskers?" I demanded, my voice shaking. Another pause. "Oh, about that. We found him a better home while you were gone." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "What do you mean, a better home? What are you talking about?" "Well, while you were gone, we realized how much trouble that cat was." The neighbor, Mrs. Whitfield, mentioned her daughter's family was looking for a cat for their children. They have a lovely big house with a yard. It was a perfect opportunity. "You gave away my cat." I could barely form the words. "Without asking me, without even telling me." "Don't be dramatic, Arlene. It's for the best. That animal was just another expense keeping you here longer." "Put Dad on the phone. Now." My father's voice was calm, reasonable, the tone he used in courtrooms. "Arlene, listen. That cat was causing problems. It scratched the basement door, meowed constantly, and quite frankly, the litter box smell was permeating the whole house. We did you a favor." "A favor, Whiskers, is my cat. Mine. You had no right. Actually, we had every right. This is our house, and that animal was becoming a nuisance. The Petersons are a good family. They have children who will love playing with it. Him, not it. Him." I was crying now, tears of shock and rage. "Where do they live? I want him back." "That's not happening," my father said firmly. "They paid good money for him, and he's settled now. It would be cruel to disrupt him again." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Paid? You sold my cat." "They made a donation to compensate for the carrier and supplies," my mother interjected, as if that made it better somehow. "You sold Whiskers while I was at grandmother's hospital bedside, after promising to take care of him." The betrayal was so profound I could barely breathe. "You're overreacting," my father said. "It's just a cat, Arlene. You can get another one when you have your own place." Just a cat. He was my companion for 3 years. He helped me through depression that you never even noticed I had. "Now you're being ridiculous," my mother sighed. "It's this kind of emotional overreaction that concerns us about your attachment to animals." I hung up, unable to bear another word. Alone in the basement, surrounded by the lingering evidence of Whisker's presence, a hair on the blanket, a toy mouse under the couch, I broke down completely. When my parents returned 2 days later, the confrontation continued in person. I'd barely slept, spending every waking hour trying to track down the Petersons my mother had mentioned. There were 3 Peterson families in our town directory, and none admitted to having recently acquired an orange tabby. "Which Petersons?" I demanded as soon as they walked through the door. "Where do they live? What's their phone number?" My father set down his suitcase with deliberate calm. "Arlene, this matter is closed. The cat has a good home. You need to move on." "How can you stand there and act like what you did wasn't a complete betrayal of trust? You promised to care for him." "We did care for him," my mother countered. "We found him a proper family home instead of a basement." "You had no right," I repeated, my voice breaking. "He was all I had." My father's expression hardened. "All you had? We've given you everything, Arlene. A roof over your head when you failed to support yourself with that impractical career choice. Food on the table. And this is the thanks we get. Histrionics over a stray cat." The argument escalated, revealing the fault lines in our relationship that had always existed but now cracked wide open. My father's controlling nature, my mother's obsession with appearances, their shared belief that they always knew best, regardless of my feelings or autonomy. "You've never respected a single decision I've made." I said, the realization crashing over me. Not my education, not my career, not even my right to care for a living creature I loved. "Respect is earned," my father replied coldly. "When you make sensible decisions, you'll have our respect." That night, I learned the truth when I found a receipt in the kitchen trash, dated 3 days after I left for Albany. It wasn't from the Petersons, but from the Crawfords, a wealthy family across town known for their expensive tastes and status symbol acquisitions. The receipt was for purebred orange tabby cat, with a price tag of $800. They hadn't just given Whiskers away. They'd sold him for profit, then lied about it. And they'd done it almost immediately after I left, not as a last resort due to problems with his care as they'd claimed. The next morning, I packed everything I owned. Finding Whiskers became my obsession. The Crawford family lived in an exclusive gated community on the north side of town, their sprawling mansion visible from the main road. I tried calling first, but no one answered the number listed in the directory. Next, I drove to the entrance of their community only to be stopped by a security guard. "I need to speak with the Crawfords about my cat," I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. The guard, a middle-aged man with a sympathetic face, shook his head. "I can't let you in without resident approval." "I can call the house for you." He did. But after a brief conversation on his radio, he turned back to me with an apologetic shrug. "They're not available. You could try leaving a message." I wrote a desperate plea explaining the situation, included my phone number, and asked the guard to deliver it. Whether he did or not, I never got a response. The next day I tried again, this time with a different approach. I claimed to be delivering a package that required a signature. The new guard was less sympathetic and more suspicious. "ID and delivery company," he asked. When I couldn't provide either, he firmly asked me to leave. "Ma'am, this could be considered harassment. I suggest you don't return without proper authorization." I contacted local animal shelters and rescue organizations, explaining my situation and asking if they could help advocate for Whisker's return. Most expressed sympathy, but explained they had no legal authority in what was essentially a property dispute. "If you have proof of ownership like vet records or adoption papers, you could try pursuing it legally," one rescue coordinator suggested. I had vet records showing 3 years of Whisker's care under my name, but consulting a lawyer revealed a depressing truth. Pets are considered property in our state, and since I was living in my parents' home without a written agreement specifying the cat was mine alone, they likely had legal standing to dispose of him as they saw fit. "It would be an uphill battle," the lawyer explained gently, "and quite expensive." Meanwhile, my parents grew increasingly irritated with my persistent efforts to recover Whiskers. "This is becoming embarrassing," my mother hissed after learning I'd contacted the Crawfords. "They're important people in this community. Your father does business with Mr. Crawford." "I don't care who they are. They bought a stolen cat." "He wasn't stolen, he was living in our house," my father countered. "And the Crawfords didn't know the circumstances. Leave them out of this." The situation reached a breaking point 3 weeks after my return from Albany. I'd been staying with my friend Jasmine most nights, coming home only to continue packing my belongings and search for any clue about Whiskers. That evening, I discovered something that shattered any remaining doubt about my parents' intentions. While looking through old mail in the kitchen drawer for a missing bill, I found a printed email exchange between my mother and Mrs. Whitfield, their neighbor. It was dated 2 days before my grandmother's heart attack, a full week before they sold Whiskers. "About that cat your daughter has," Mrs. Whitfield had written. "My bridge partner, Barbara Crawford, mentioned her granddaughter's birthday is coming up, and they're looking for an unusual pet. I remembered you saying what a beautiful orange cat it was. Might be a good opportunity if Arlene is still planning to move out soon." My mother had replied, "What perfect timing. James and I were just discussing how to handle the cat situation before Arlene leaves. The basement will need a complete cleaning. Let me speak with Barbara directly." They had planned it all along. My grandmother's emergency hadn't prompted a difficult decision about Whisker's care. It had simply provided the perfect opportunity to execute a plan already in motion, without my knowledge or interference. I confronted them that night, email in hand. "You planned this before I even left," I said, my voice eerily calm despite the storm raging inside me. "You were just waiting for a chance to get rid of him." My father barely glanced at the email. "We were considering options. Your grandmother's situation simply accelerated the timeline." Options! There was only one option. Whiskers stays with me. He's my responsibility, my family. Family! My mother laughed, the sound brittle and cold. It was a cat, Arlene, not a person. This obsession with animals over human relationships is precisely why we were concerned. The only human relationship I'm concerned about right now is ours, I replied, and you've just shown me exactly what it's worth to you. Nothing. I left that night taking what I could fit in my car and leaving the rest behind. Jasmine welcomed me into her small apartment without hesitation, making space in her closet and helping me set up an air mattress in her living room. Stay as long as you need, she said, hugging me as I cried for what felt like the 100th time. We'll figure this out together. The next day, I emptied my savings account to put a deposit on a tiny studio apartment that allowed pets, even though I no longer had one. It would be ready in 2 weeks. Until then, I'd stay with Jasmine and try to rebuild some semblance of normalcy. My parents called and texted multiple times, their messages shifting from defensive justification to minimization. You're making a mountain out of a molehill, my father's text read. Come home and we can discuss this rationally. The holidays are coming up, my mother reminded me. Family should be together despite disagreements. I didn't respond to any of them. The wound was too raw, the betrayal too complete. When I finally moved into my studio apartment, I changed my phone number and email address, severing the last direct lines of communication with my parents. It was only later, as Thanksgiving approached, that I began to hear from extended family members. Your mother says you're not speaking to them over some misunderstanding about a pet, my Aunt Sarah asked during a rare phone call. She's very upset, Arlene. It wasn't a misunderstanding, I replied carefully, not wanting to drag others into the conflict, but unwilling to accept the false narrative. They sold my cat without permission while I was at grandmother's bedside, then lied about it. I found out they had planned it before grandmother even got sick. The silence on the other end was telling. That's not what they told the family, Sarah finally said. What did they tell everyone? What followed was the first glimpse into the elaborate story my parents had constructed. According to them, I had asked them to find a new home for Whiskers because I could no longer care for him properly. They had reluctantly agreed to help found a wonderful family, and now I was inexplicably angry about the favor they'd done me. Furthermore, they suggested my extreme reaction was evidence of emotional instability, possibly due to the stress of grandmother's illness. They're worried about you, Arlene, Sarah finished. We all are. They're lying, I said simply. But I don't expect you to take my word over theirs. As Christmas approached, the pressure intensified. Family members I rarely heard from suddenly called or sent messages, all with the same underlying theme: reconciliation. My grandmother, now recovered enough to be moved to a rehabilitation facility, became their unwitting pawn. Your grandmother is asking why you haven't visited, my mother wrote in an email forwarded by another relative since she couldn't reach me directly. Are you really going to punish her for something she had nothing to do with? It was emotional manipulation at its finest, and it worked to the extent that I did visit my grandmother at the rehab center, carefully timing my visit to avoid my parents. She looked frailer than I remembered, but smiled warmly when I entered her room. There's my girl, she said, reaching for my hand. I've missed you. We talked for an hour about her recovery, her physical therapy, the book she was reading to pass the time. It was only as I was preparing to leave that she brought up the elephant in the room. Your mother tells me you're upset about the cat, she said gently. I understand you are attached, but family is more important than pets, dear. The fact that even my grandmother, whom I'd always seen as an ally, had accepted my parents' version of events was the final straw. I realized then that I wasn't just fighting my parents' actions, but a carefully constructed narrative designed to isolate me and paint me as unreasonable. It's not about the cat anymore, Grandma, I tried to explain. It's about trust and respect. They betrayed both. She patted my hand. They love you in their way. Try to forgive them. I kissed her goodbye, promising to visit again soon, but left with a heavy heart, knowing that forgiveness without accountability or change wasn't healing. It was surrender. By spring, I had settled into my new life. I found a better-paying position at a larger veterinary practice, made new friends through work, and even went on a few dates, though none progressed to serious relationships. The tiny studio became home decorated with plants and photographs, but no pets yet. I wasn't ready. Through mutual acquaintances, I occasionally heard news of my parents. They had renovated the basement where I'd lived, turning it into an entertainment room. My father had received a promotion. My mother had joined the board of a local charity. Life went on for them, apparently unaffected by my absence. For holidays and family gatherings, I made excuses or simply didn't respond to invitations. Some relatives stopped trying to include me, accepting the new family dynamic. Others persisted, becoming unwitting messengers in my parents' campaign to rewrite history. Your father mentioned you were always talking about finding a better home for that cat, a cousin said during a chance meeting at a grocery store. He said you were relieved when they handled it for you during your grandmother's emergency. Each new lie they spread strengthened my resolve to maintain distance. It wasn't just about Whiskers anymore, though I still thought of him daily, wondering if he was truly well cared for, if he missed me as much as I missed him. It was about recognizing the pattern of control manipulation and disrespect that had defined our relationship my entire life. As the first year of separation stretched into the second and then the third, I began the difficult work of healing through therapy. Dr. Levine, a compassionate woman with kind eyes and a direct manner, helped me understand that what I'd experienced wasn't just the loss of a beloved pet, but a profound breach of trust by the people who should have protected my heart, not broken it. You're mourning multiple losses, she explained. The loss of Whiskers, yes, but also the loss of the parents you deserve to have, and perhaps the loss of the person you were before this betrayal. Through our sessions, I began to recognize the patterns of my upbringing that had made me vulnerable to my parents' manipulation for so many years. The conditional love the criticism disguised as concern, the subtle undermining of my confidence and autonomy. Whiskers had been one of the few areas of my life where I'd stood firm, and perhaps that's why they targeted him. Controlling people often eliminate what they perceive as competition for influence, Dr. Levine suggested. Your attachment to Whiskers represented independence from their control. Understanding didn't lessen the pain, but it helped me process it. I stopped blaming myself for not anticipating their betrayal, for not taking Whiskers with me to Albany, for all the what-ifs that had haunted my sleepless nights. 4 years after Whiskers, I felt ready to open my heart again. I visited a local animal shelter and adopted 2 bonded adult cats, a black female named Luna and a gray tabby male named Orion. They weren't replacements for Whiskers, but new companions on my journey. Their presence filled my apartment with life and helped heal the remaining raw edges of my grief. Life settled into a new normal as the years passed. My career advanced, I moved to a larger apartment, and my circle of friends grew. Luna and Orion thrived their distinct personalities, bringing joy to my days. I created a small sanctuary for abandoned cats, in partnership with a local rescue finding homes for dozens of animals and keeping the ones deemed unadoptable until they too found their perfect matches. Occasionally, I still heard from family members with updates about my parents, usually accompanied by hints about reconciliation. Your mother asked about you at the Labor Day barbecue, my cousin Jennifer texted during the 5th year of our estrangement. She seems different lately, more reflective. Maybe it's time to consider talking to them. I'd heard similar suggestions before and had learned to respond neutrally. Thank you for passing that along. I replied, neither committing to nor rejecting the idea outright. The truth was, I had considered reaching out many times, not because I believed they had changed or would acknowledge the harm they'd done, but because the weight of being the family outcast sometimes felt exhausting. During holidays or family milestones, the absence of normal familial relationships became more pronounced, a quiet ache that never fully subsided. Yet each time I contemplated contact, I remembered not just what they'd done to Whiskers, but their response afterward. The lies, the manipulation, the refusal to acknowledge my feelings as valid. Without fundamental change on their part, reconciliation would mean returning to the same dysfunctional dynamic, just with new boundaries for them to test and eventually cross. In the 6th year of our separation, my cousin Jennifer announced her wedding. The invitation arrived in my mailbox on a rainy Tuesday, cream-colored envelope with gold lettering. Inside was a handwritten note, Really hope you'll come. All family will be there. But I promise no forced reunions. Love you. The emphasis on all family wasn't subtle, but Jennifer had always been kind to me, one of the few relatives who never pressured me about my parents. I decided to attend, preparing myself mentally for the inevitable awkwardness of being in the same space with them after so long. I bought a new dress arranged for a friend to watch Luna and Orion and drove 3 hours to the coastal hotel where the wedding would take place. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 p.m., followed by cocktails and then dinner. My plan was to attend the ceremony, make a brief appearance at the cocktail hour, then leave before dinner, when seating arrangements might force uncomfortable proximity. The ceremony was beautiful, held on a flower-filled terrace overlooking the ocean. I sat near the back, arriving just before it began, and keeping my eyes focused forward, though I could feel the weight of stares from family members who hadn't seen me in years. Afterward, as guests mingled on the terrace waiting for the cocktail hour to begin, I stayed in conversation with a former classmate who was also a guest, strategically positioning myself away from where my parents stood, receiving congratulations alongside the bride's parents. My strategy worked for about 20 minutes. Then I felt a tap on my shoulder and turned to find my mother standing there, looking older than I remembered, but still immaculately dressed and groomed. "Arlene," she said, her voice wavering slightly. "It's good to see you." And my father appeared beside her, his once salt and pepper hair now fully silver. "You look well," he offered, as if we'd seen each other last week instead of 6 years ago. "Thank you," I replied, my carefully rehearsed neutral response. "Congratulations on Jennifer's wedding. She looks beautiful." "We need to talk," my mother said, glancing around at the nearby guests who were failing to hide their interest in our reunion. "Privately." "I don't think that's a good idea," I began, but she interrupted. "Please, Arlene. It's been 6 years. Enough is enough." My father nodded. "Family shouldn't be estranged like this. It isn't right." I was about to excuse myself when my mother reached for my hand, her eyes suddenly filling with tears. "We miss you. Whatever misunderstandings happened, surely we can move past them." Misunderstandings. There it was again, the minimization, the subtle shifting of narrative to suggest mutual culpability rather than deliberate betrayal. "I'd prefer not to discuss this here," I said quietly. "This is Jennifer's day. We shouldn't make it about us." "When then?" my father pressed. "You've shut down every attempt at communication for years. You changed your number, your email. You've rejected every olive branch." The conversation was drawing attention, now guests glancing our way, some openly staring. My mother, ever aware of appearances, seemed to make a calculated decision. Her voice raised just enough to carry to nearby listeners. "We've been trying to apologize for years," she said, her tone taking on a public performance quality I recognized from childhood. "Everyone makes mistakes. We thought we were doing what was best. The cat was just so unhappy in that basement." And there it was, the public ambush, the performance of reasonable parents faced with an unreasonable child calculated to leverage social pressure and witnesses. I felt trapped, cornered between making a scene by walking away or engaging in their manipulative reconciliation theater. "Mom," I said quietly, "this isn't the place, and that version of events isn't accurate. Please, let's not do this to Jennifer." My father's face hardened. "Always the same excuse. Never the right time, never the right place. The truth is, you've chosen a cat over your family for 6 years. A cat that probably lived a few more years at most." The casual cruelty of his statement, the dismissal of Whisker's significance, confirmed everything therapy had helped me understand about their fundamental lack of empathy. I took a deep breath, centering myself. "I'm going to congratulate Jennifer and Daniel," I said calmly. "I wish you both well, but I'm not ready for this conversation, especially not here." As I turned to leave, my mother caught my arm. "Your father's health hasn't been good," she said urgently. "High blood pressure, concerns about his heart. Is that what you want? To have regrets if something happens?" It was the final manipulation tactic, leveraging fear and guilt. I gently removed her hand from my arm. "I'm sorry to hear that. I hope his health improves." With that, I walked away, found Jennifer to wish her happiness, and left the reception earlier than planned, the weight of the encounter sitting heavy on my chest. During the long drive home, my phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from family members who had witnessed the exchange. Most expressed disappointment in my continued hard-heartedness and urged reconciliation. A few acknowledged the awkwardness of the public confrontation, but still suggested I should be the bigger person. Only one message from my cousin Mark struck a different tone. That ambush was uncalled for. You held your ground with grace. Call if you need to talk. By the time I arrived home, I was emotionally exhausted, but oddly clear-headed. The encounter had confirmed what I'd suspected: nothing had changed. No genuine acknowledgement of harm done, no real apology. Just pressure to conform to their version of reality for the sake of appearances. Luna and Orion greeted me at the door, their presence a reminder of the authentic connection I'd built in my new life. As I stroked their fur, I realized I no longer felt the ache of loss that had dominated the early years of separation. In its place was something quieter, a gentle sadness for what might have been, but acceptance of what was. The fallout from the wedding confrontation was swift and widespread. Within days, relatives I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly found my email address or work phone number, all delivering variations of the same message. My parents were heartbroken. They had tried to make amends. Wasn't it time to forgive and move on? Your mother was in tears the entire reception, wrote an aunt I barely knew. Is this really the person you want to be? Someone who holds grudges for years? My cousin Jennifer, despite her promise of no forced reunions, sent a gentle but pointed message. I know they surprised you, and that wasn't fair, but they really seem to want to make things right. Maybe give them one chance for the family. The pressure intensified as my father apparently shared news of his worsening health condition with anyone who would listen. Heart concerns, medication adjustments, talk of possible procedures, all conveyed to me through the family grapevine, with the unspoken subtext, reconcile before it's too late. 2 weeks after the wedding, I received an unexpected call from my grandmother, now 88 and still living independently with some home care assistance. Arlene, dear, it's Grandma. She began, her voice frailer than I remembered, but her directness unchanged. I've stayed out of this situation between you and your parents because I believe adults should resolve their own conflicts. But I'm concerned about what I'm hearing. What are you hearing, Grandma? I asked, bracing myself. Your parents say you refused to even discuss reconciliation at Jennifer's wedding, that you were cold and dismissive of their health concerns. But your cousin Mark tells a different story about a public ambush designed to pressure you through witnesses. I was silent, surprised by her awareness of these conflicting accounts. I'm 88 years old, Arlene. I don't have time for games or half-truths. I want to know your side before I form any judgments. For the first time in 6 years, I told the full story to a family member who seemed genuinely willing to listen without predetermined conclusions. I explained about Whiskers, the deliberate planning before my grandmother's heart attack. The lies afterward, the manipulative narrative they'd spread through the family, and their continued refusal to acknowledge any real harm done. When I finished, there was a long silence before she spoke again. That sounds like James and Diana, she finally said, sighing. Your mother learned manipulation from watching her father, my late husband. He was a master at rewriting uncomfortable truths to suit his preferred narrative. I'd hoped she wouldn't carry that forward. Her acknowledgement, the first validation from any family member that my experience might be real and legitimate, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Thank you for listening, Grandma. I should have asked years ago, she replied. Now what do you need from me? Just this, I said. Just knowing someone in the family doesn't think I'm crazy or vindictive. You're neither, dear. Hurt, yes. Protective of yourself, understandably, but not what they've painted you to be. After we hung up, I sat with the strange new feeling of being believed, of having my reality affirmed, rather than questioned or dismissed. It was a small thing, perhaps, but it felt monumental after years of gaslighting and isolation. The next day, my cousin Amanda, whom I'd always been close with before the estrangement, called with disturbing news. Arlene, I wanted to warn you. Aunt Diana is telling people you said horrible things to your grandmother, that you made her cry and upset her so much she might need medical attention. What? We had a good conversation. She was fine when we hung up. I figured it wasn't true, Amanda said. But they're really amping up the campaign to bring you back into the fold. Uncle James told my dad that the prodigal daughter narrative has gone on long enough, and it's time to end this ridiculous rebellion before family events become even more awkward. The phrase prodigal daughter narrative revealed so much about how they viewed the situation, not as a legitimate response to betrayal, but as a story arc that needed a satisfying conclusion for the audience, regardless of my actual feelings or needs. A week later, I learned from another relative that my parents had told my little cousin's children, aged 7 and 9, that cousin Arlene doesn't love family enough to come to gatherings, when they asked why I wasn't at a recent birthday party. Something in me snapped at that. Using children as pawns, poisoning their understanding of complex adult relationships, potentially damaging my relationship with the next generation of the family, all to pressure me into compliance with their preferred reality. It was a line I couldn't allow them to cross. After 6 years of maintaining my privacy, of refusing to engage in their narrative warfare, I realized that silence had become complicity in my own isolation. By not telling my story publicly, I had ceded the entire narrative to them, allowing their version to become the family's accepted truth. That night, I sat down at my computer and began writing. I started with Whiskers, describing how I found him, our 3 years together, the bond we formed. I detailed the events surrounding my grandmother's heart attack, the promises made, the instructions left. I described the betrayal of returning home to find him gone, the discovery that they had planned it before the emergency, the revelation that they had sold him for profit. I included screenshots of the email exchange with Mrs. Whitfield that proved premeditation, photos of the detailed care instructions I'd left, and text messages from the days after my return showing their shifting explanations. I added Jasmine's written account as a witness to both my relationship with Whiskers and my devastation upon returning home. From there, I outlined the years of lies they'd spread through the family, the manipulative tactics used to pressure reconciliation without accountability, culminating in the public ambush at Jennifer's wedding. I was careful to stick to verifiable facts and direct experiences, avoiding speculation about their motives or character beyond what their actions clearly demonstrated. It took 3 days to complete editing for clarity and emotional tone, ensuring it read not as a vengeful expose, but as a necessary correction to a false narrative that had harmed me for years. When it was finished, I reread it one last time, my finger hovering over the post button. Was this really necessary? Was it worth the inevitable fallout? For a moment, doubt crept in. The lifetime of conditioning to protect family secrets, to maintain appearances, to sacrifice my reality for collective harmony. Then I thought of those children being told I didn't love family enough, of future family gatherings where my absence would be explained through lies, of the continued erosion of my character in the family's collective understanding. If not for my own peace, then for the truth itself, the record needed to be set straight. I posted it to my social media accounts, visible to friends and family, with a simple introduction. After 6 years of silence, I'm sharing my side of a story that has been told without my input for too long. Then I turned off notifications, put my phone away, and took Luna and Orion for a walk in their harnesses around the neighborhood, breathing in the autumn air and preparing myself for whatever would come next. The response was immediate and overwhelming. By evening, my phone was flooded with messages, calls, and notifications. I sorted through them slowly, prepared for anger and defense, from those closest to my parents. But the reactions were more varied than I'd anticipated. Some relatives expressed shock and dismay, having never heard this version of events. "I had no idea," wrote a cousin. "They told us you'd had some kind of breakdown over a pet and refused all help." Others confirmed parts of my account based on inconsistencies they'd noticed in my parents' version over the years. "Your mother told me 3 different stories about that cat," an aunt wrote. "First that you asked them to find it a home, then that it ran away, then that they had to give it away because of allergies. I always wondered what really happened." A few expressed understanding of why I'd maintained distance. No wonder you've stayed away. I wouldn't trust them either after something like that. Not all responses were supportive. Several relatives defended my parents, suggesting I was exaggerating or misremembering that 6 years was too long to hold a grudge, regardless of what had happened. That publicly airing family business was inappropriate, regardless of provocation. My father's sister called her voice tight with anger. How dare you embarrass them like this? They raised you, put you through college, gave you everything. And this is how you repay them, by humiliating them in front of everyone we know. I listened calmly, then simply asked, "Is what I posted untrue in any way?" Her hesitation was telling. "That's not the point. Family matters stay private." "They didn't stay private when my parents spread lies about me for 6 years," I replied. "They didn't stay private when they told children I don't love family. The truth deserves the same audience that heard the lies." The most unexpected message came 3 days after my post from an unfamiliar email address with the subject line, "About Whiskers." "My name is David Crawford. I believe you've been looking for an orange tabby cat that was once yours. If you're the Arlene Anderson whose parents sold us a cat named Whiskers about 6 years ago, I'd like to speak with you." My heart raced as I opened the email. David explained that he had seen my social media post through a mutual connection. He confirmed that his parents had indeed purchased Whiskers from my parents as a surprise for his daughter's birthday. "I had no idea of the circumstances," he wrote. "Your parents presented themselves as the cat's owners and said they were moving to a place that didn't allow pets. Had I known he was taken from you without consent, I never would have participated in that transaction." And he went on to say that Whiskers had lived with them for 4 years before passing away from kidney failure at approximately 10 years of age. He was well loved and cared for. David assured me. My daughter adored him, and he seemed to adjust well to our home, though the vet said his condition was likely a result of early life hardship before you rescued him. The email concluded with an offer to share photos of Whiskers' time with them and an apology for his unwitting role in my pain. "I can't undo what happened, but I can at least offer you closure and confirmation that he was loved until the end." I sat at my computer, tears streaming down my face, feeling a complex mixture of grief, relief, and gratitude. After 6 years of wondering, of imagining worst-case scenarios, knowing that Whiskers had been cared for, that he had known love in his final years, lifted a weight I hadn't realized I was still carrying. I replied immediately, thanking David for reaching out and accepting his offer of photos. The next day, he sent a folder containing dozens of images. Whiskers sleeping in a sun patch on an expensive-looking couch, playing with toys, being gently held by a smiling young girl. The final photo, dated 2 years earlier, showed a small memorial stone in their garden, with his name and the words, "Beloved friend." "My daughter wanted him to have a special place," David explained in his accompanying message. "She still visits his stone on his adoption anniversary." I wrote back thanking him again, explaining what Whiskers had meant to me, how he'd helped me through depression, how losing him had changed the course of my life. His response was kind and understanding, offering to have his daughter write to me about her memories of Whiskers if I thought it might bring additional comfort. A week after my original post, when the initial flood of responses had slowed to a trickle, I received a letter by mail, the formal cream stationery and precise handwriting, immediately recognizable as my mother's. The letter began stiffly expressing disappointment in my decision to publicly malign them. But as it continued, something unexpected emerged. For the first time in 6 years, there was acknowledgement of wrongdoing, however qualified. While we maintained that our intentions were to solve a difficult situation, she wrote, "We recognize in hindsight that selling your cat without consultation was an error in judgment that caused you significant distress. For that specific action, we apologize." The apology came with caveats, suggestions that I had been unusually attached to Whiskers, that their actions were motivated by practical concerns about his care during my absence, that the aftermath had been exacerbated by mutual misunderstandings. But it was still more acknowledgement than I'd ever expected to receive. The letter concluded with a carefully worded invitation. If you feel this acknowledgement addresses your concerns, we would welcome the opportunity to begin rebuilding our relationship at whatever pace you find comfortable. I read the letter several times, trying to gauge its sincerity. Was this a genuine step toward accountability or damage control after their narrative had been publicly challenged? The timing suggested the latter, but the acknowledgement of specific harm done, however limited, was unprecedented. After careful consideration and discussion with Dr. Levine in therapy, I decided not to respond immediately. An apology driven by public pressure rather than genuine remorse or understanding deserved thoughtful evaluation, not hasty acceptance or rejection. Instead, I posted a brief update to my original social media statement, thanking those who had offered support and understanding, expressing appreciation to David Crawford for providing closure about Whiskers, and noting that I had received communication from my parents that I was considering privately. This was never about vengeance or forcing a reconciliation, I wrote. It was about finally standing in my truth after years of silence. Where things go from here remains to be seen, but I'm at peace with the decision to speak up regardless of outcome. In the weeks that followed, an unexpected shift occurred in the family dynamic. Where once I had been the isolated outlier, now others began sharing their own experiences with my parents' manipulative behaviors, creating a small but significant community of mutual support and validation. They did something similar with my son's college choice, a cousin confided. Undermined him constantly, then acted bewildered when he became depressed. I always thought it was just us. My grandmother, ever the surprise, called to tell me she was proud of my courage. Truth is a burden until it's spoken, she said. Then it becomes a foundation. As for my parents, I eventually responded to their letter with one of my own, acknowledging their partial apology, but explaining that reconciliation would require more than damage control in the face of public exposure. It would need genuine understanding of the harm done, not just by the initial betrayal, but by the years of lies and manipulation that followed. I'm open to beginning that conversation, I concluded, but only if it's grounded in honesty and respect, not in managing appearances or rushing to a comfortable conclusion. Whether that conversation will ever happen remains uncertain. What is certain is that I've found my voice after years of silence, my truth after years of others' narratives. In doing so, I've discovered that family isn't defined by blood or obligation, but by mutual respect, honesty, and the freedom to be authentically oneself, without fear of betrayal or manipulation. Looking back now, the journey from that rainy day when I rescued Whiskers to this moment has been transformative in ways I never could have anticipated. What began as a simple act of compassion for a frightened cat in a storm drain became the catalyst for my own liberation from patterns of control and manipulation that had shaped my entire life. The healing process wasn't linear. There were days, especially early on, when the pain of losing Whiskers felt as fresh as the moment I returned home to find him gone. There were nights when I questioned my decision to maintain boundaries with my parents, when the weight of being the family problem felt too heavy to bear. There were moments when reconciliation on any terms seemed preferable to continued estrangement. But with time therapy and the support of chosen family, I found strength I didn't know I possessed. I built a life aligned with my values, centered on compassion and authenticity, rather than appearance and control. My work with the Animal Sanctuary expanded, eventually becoming a registered nonprofit that partners with local shelters to rescue and rehabilitate cats others have given up on. Luna and Orion, my faithful companions, have been joined by a rotating cast of foster cats awaiting their forever homes. My small apartment has given way to a modest house with a secure outdoor enclosure where the cats can safely experience fresh air and sunshine. It's nothing like my parents' immaculate colonial, but it's filled with love, laughter, and the occasional knocked-over plant or shredded paper towel roll, signs of life being lived authentically. As for my relationship with my parents, we've established a careful, distant communication. After my response to their letter, They suggested family counseling, which I agreed to on condition that they first read and discussed certain books about emotional manipulation and toxic family dynamics. Their willingness to do so, however reluctantly, suggested at least some openness to examining their behaviors. We've had 3 sessions with a family therapist specializing in estrangement and reconciliation. Progress has been slow and sometimes painful. Old patterns emerge, are identified, and carefully addressed. There are moments of genuine connection, followed by frustrating retreats into defensiveness. Whether this process will lead to a meaningful relationship remains to be seen, but at least it's grounded in reality now, not in fictional narratives or obligatory performances of familial harmony. The most profound change has been internal. I no longer question my perceptions or minimize my feelings to accommodate others' comfort. I recognize manipulation tactics quickly and respond with boundaries rather than compliance. I understand that loving someone doesn't mean accepting mistreatment, and that sometimes the most compassionate choice for yourself and others is to stand firmly in your truth, even when that truth is uncomfortable or inconvenient. Whiskers, wherever his spirit may be, taught me more than just the joy of animal companionship. His brief life and the painful circumstances of our separation became the unexpected catalyst for my growth, resilience, and eventual freedom from patterns that might otherwise have defined my entire life. The pictures David Crawford shared of Whiskers in his final years sit framed on my bedside table now alongside photos of Luna and Orion. They remind me daily that love persists beyond separation, that truth matters more than comfortable fictions, and that sometimes the most difficult paths lead to the most necessary destinations. If there's one lesson I'd share from this journey, it's this: trust yourself. When someone tells you your feelings aren't valid, your memories aren't accurate, or your boundaries aren't reasonable, remember that only you can define your truth. Stand in it firmly, speak it when necessary, and build your life around it, even when that means walking away from what others insist you should accept. Has anyone else had to make difficult decisions about family relationships to protect your own well-being? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. And if this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to the channel for more stories about finding strength through difficult circumstances. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the family we choose brings more healing than the family we're born into. Until next time, be gentle with yourselves